Welcome everyone to this week's Winds of Spirit book study discussion. I'm Brigid Hopkins. This week we're discussing chapter 14, Wind Knots. I'd like to invite each of us that are in attendance and those that will be joining us either later or with their energy, please take a moment and allow all of your senses to just soften. Really taking in a nice deep breath, blowing everything out. Taking in a nice deep breath once more and holding it for 10 seconds. And release for 10 seconds. Doing that again, breathing in, holding for 5 to 10, and releasing for 5 to 10. And I'd like for us to begin using the power of our imagination to walk into the field of our sacred space. Really checking in with your body in this moment to leave behind anything that is going to cause you to drift in your presence, anything that feels too heavy to carry in or burdensome in some way. Just really invite that aspect to stay behind, and you can pick it up on your way out. And begin to walk underneath the stone archway, circling from the right to the left. And take a moment to look around the circle. Tune into your heart space, that space right in the center of your chest, right behind your lungs, or excuse me, your chest cavity. And really listen to the beat of your heart. And now I'd like you again, with the power of your imagination, to begin envisioning a color that intuitively comes to you, that is your color for the energy of love. And allow that color to start moving from the base of your feet all the way up your legs, through your torso, really filling in your abdomen and your chest area. Feel it as it moves all the way up through your fingers and arms and shoulders, up through your neck and your head. And feeling that overflow of love. And if you're not feeling overflow, then stay with that space for a few more minutes. Really calling to mind what brings you ease and joy and good sensations and feelings, purity, if you will. There's no hesitation. And again, whatever color that is for you, just imagine that that starts pouring out of the center of your heart and into the center of our circle, that there's a huge basin in the center of our circle that we can fill with this beautiful, pure energy of love. And just letting that flow for another 30 seconds. Just really connecting with how free it feels to just give love without any hesitation. any meaning. It's just free to give. And we'll leave that in the center of our circle as I look to see what wind is going to greet us today for our call on wind knots. Today we have the New Zealand wind, Tahiri Matea, tempest, roll with the storm. And as I greet Tahiri Matea, just allow that energy to keep flowing from you, through you, and out from you. Wonderful. And when you're feeling ready, just slow the flow and ever so gently begin to wiggle your toes. You don't have to stop the flow if it feels right to keep it going, just at a much slower pace. You're more than welcome to do so. Really listening to your body. Wiggle your fingers and go ahead and open your eyes. So welcome, wind knots. I'd like to start this chapter with the poem by Macbeth that was on page 113. And I'm a little rusty on my Macbeth, so please bear with me. I'll give thee a wind. Thou art kind, and I another. I myself have all the other, and the very ports they blow. All the quarters that they know, I, the shipman's card. It's a very full contemplation in that poem. But I would like to open the floor first to see if there's any sharing that would like to take place, anything that's been coming up for you, any questions that you might have, or even, what your thoughts are around wind knots. Do you have any experience with them?
I don't have any experience with wind knots, but I was intrigued by the first page and the idea that these are magical knots from wind witches. And I think the paragraph, another paragraph that caught me was, as you become, on page 114, as you become proficient at knot making, you will learn how to use wind knots to harness your thoughts, your emotions, and physical objects. Your knots will become sacred containers of stored energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been working with sacred containers and safe containers to work within with people. And nature in all kinds of aspects. So that is very inviting to me. But also in the title, managing intensity. Mm-hmm. I have been always a very intense person. So I thought, well, it's my passion. I get passionate about things and I dig in deep and do a study and that I love it. But I've learned over the years that my intensity, and I can relate to this to the wind as well, is that it's not always welcome by others, my
Mm.
intensity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of that in terms of people who don't like intense wind, intense like storms. I happen to love them, but so that's kind of what caught me. I didn't have time to do the exercise yet, but I'm anxious to do that.
Well, two things that I'm like, I was ready to just spit it out and interrupt you, but looking at the parallel between you really working with safe containers and how much you enjoy the nature's intensity because you are a safe container.
Ah, wow. Okay. I love that.
Well, it's very difficult to be with intensity when you don't know if you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're welcoming it and you enjoy it, and it almost sounds like you can feel a sense of playfulness in it. You know, like you really
Yes.
got like, like crab like for a minute. And I was like, oh, she likes to play in the storms. That's because you're a safe container.
Ah,
That's
okay.
that's how I see it. And that's, direct projection, if you will, for myself. I
Thank
couldn't
you.
stay out in intensity because I didn't know if I would be okay. That's what drew me to the wind work to begin with.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's been a lot of deepening and learning about how to be safe in my own vessel in spite of what's going on around me.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Drop the mic. You're welcome. I'll go home now. I'm kidding. Hi, Carrie. I see you just joined us. Welcome.
Hello.
So, hi. I had just said I opened up the floor for everyone to say hello and then share if there's anything that's come up for you recently that you would like to throw into the conversation. We will be discussing the Would Not chapter, but yeah, if anything's come up in the last couple chapters or any wind epiphanies, feel free to share.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Paula.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Brigid.
Hi.
I think these wind knots are way ahead of where I'm at. I'm still trying to have a basic relationship with the winds. And I've been working with Nilchi this week. And although, well, anyway, I'm still not sure. We're still new.
Mm-hmm.
But I was going to say that this is intriguing, but the third wind knot scares me, at least the way it's described.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, no way. At least the part where Brigid untied a third, lost her job, had to move several states away. Anyway, where it's supposed to be is it always this disruptive? Is that the nature of the third knot?
Well,
Yeah.
right. So managing intensities, right? And I'm glad that you brought up that question early on because I really want to work with, this takes us back to resistance. We've talked a lot about that over the last couple chapters. And our bodies, being really mindful of our body state when we go into creation with the wind knots, right? It is about intention. It is also about your mental state. Like if you go into anything with any sense of fear or trepidation, you're literally infusing that energy into the experience. And so when you go to release an experience that was coupled with that, fearful, trepidatious energy, it'll come back. I would love to tell you that the third knot is not intense. And this is going to be a hard chapter about the knot, the KNOT and the NOT, but it's going to be a knot. Watching the wind groups, listening to experiences, all of them have had some level of intensity. I have not heard of one of them being in a way that wasn't for the greatest outcome. And so I think with many unknown things that we experience in our lives, we naturally have that little inclination of, oof, I'm going to rock a boat. And I don't know if I want to rock a boat because I don't really know where I'm going to land. But that's one of the big invitations of working with the wind. The wind moves freely and does what it needs to do without any sense of worry, guilt. Even when it's fierce, it doesn't apologize and it doesn't stop, right? So where can we become comfortable with that type of amplification? You know, we all have that ability to be intense, but we normally don't because it's not socially acceptable. It's not really that welcomed. You know, like Deborah was saying, she'll walk into a situation with her intensity and people shy away. But it doesn't mean that the intensity is wrong. Just like with the third knot, when you go to open the third knot and things reorient themselves in a way that we couldn't have envisioned, but we did infuse an intention, we put a request in there. But the way that it comes to us, I find with all divination, seldom looks like how I had planned. The very first time that I had done the wind knots, I was super skeptical. I was like, I'll try it. But I wasn't into ceremony that much, or like I didn't really understand the sacredness of it and the importance of the order and how to store it. And I was very haphazard. So I put my beautiful knots in a bag they didn't coil. I just threw them in there and they all opened that night. And I had one of those, oh my dear Lord, what did I just do moments? Because even though I wasn't being really thoughtful and mindful about how I was handling this, I too had that sense of, oh my goodness, what did I just wish upon myself? And I went and signed up to be in the food addict recovery program within a week of that situation. And it was so intense for me, Paula. Like, it's been one of the hardest emotional things I've done. And I've done a lot, but that, like, it propelled me in the direction that I had to go, that I never wanted to go. And, you know, I'm going to wrap up here, but I needed that much intensity from the third knot because I was healing a pattern in my ancestry that goes back as far as anyone can remember. The addict that lives in our family line has traveled generation to generation, and I was the first one to step into recovery and face my food addiction. So it took a lot of intensity to get me there.
Wow, that's a powerful story. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
Three knots it took you.
Yes. Yeah. And here's what's so funny. So intention, right? I knew I wanted to have better health, but I didn't know that I had food addiction. I knew I had some behaviors that probably weren't functional or healthy, but I never would have thought food addiction. And then, you know, so that happened with the 3 knots opening. All of a sudden I see something pass by me about a program for food addicts. And I was like, is that a thing? And then another thing came, and then whoop, I found a meeting and I was there. And I just remember thinking, like, a force greater than myself brought me here, because there was just no way. Like, it wasn't even in my consciousness. So yes, I asked for better health, but what I needed was radical, right? So super intense. I needed a lot of energy to support me to get there. So that's what I mean about, like, being afraid. You know, the outcome, we can always look back in hindsight and be like, well, there was no reason to be afraid. I shook and I cried and I was terrified and I felt so ashamed walking into that meeting. And when I left, I just remember calling my husband, like, I can't believe I'm here. How did I get here? You know, like, shell shocked, you know? So it was still scary in the moment, but it needed to happen, you know? So I think that a healthy dose of fear is always good for us. If something doesn't scare us, we kind of lose interest. I do anyways. I don't know about anybody else. I get a little apathetic, like, you know. So I've made friends with fear. I think that when fear is present, I'm probably heading in a good direction for myself.
That is a very interesting concept. My goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're not feeling comfortable doing the wind knots yet, listen to yourself. Listen to that magical moment when you're like, I'm going to give this a try. And you can even ask the winds, this is a trial run. Let's be gentle. Let's make the third knot. It'll get my attention, but it doesn't have to flip me upside down, shake me by the tail, and throw me out back into the wind, right? So ask for what you need, because it is a relationship. And so really being an advocate for yourself and asking for what you need is a really, really solid component to this.
Great. Well, I think for me, fear has been a thread of my whole life, which I've, met with little by little, but certainly starting working in shamanic courses and then stepping up and doing the wind course. I was a little, of course, didn't know what I was getting into.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, well, thanks. I really appreciated your sharing all of that. And it's great information and powerful to hear it.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you're here, Paula, even when you're afraid. Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in?
I'll share. Again, I'm in the dark because I'm driving.
That's okay.
The third wind knot. I remember when I unraveled or untied my third wind knot, and I was afraid of what would happen. I think I had these expectations, and really, it was like nothing happened right away, and I was like, oh well, maybe my third wind knot was a dud. And then things started to happen, and it was like a steady wind. It wasn't a gush, but it was a steady wind that was increasing and increasing. It was bringing things to my mind, bringing things into my life. But I recognized, oh, okay, this is what's coming. Is from this. I'm being presented with actions that I could take, and I didn't have to take them. And I was given a lot of space that I could think about taking them and then make the choice in my own time. And then when I made the choice, things moved even faster. So we do still have, sometimes things happen out of our control, but sometimes the winds bring us things and say, here you go, you asked for this. And it's a choice to move with the wind or to block. And I've done both. But today I'll share, I just accepted a new job. So this is another huge change that's come from the wind work. And it's going to be really energizing. Speaking about that fear, there is a little bit of fear and of change, but this change is good. And I'm working with the arrow for the year, and the arrow keeps flying and the wind keeps pushing it further and further into places where I did not see. So the last thing I'll say is just intention is so much a part of that. And to remember our own power. Some of the ways that in the book, it talks about the wind sounds dangerous, harsh, rough, wild, and those words really can be like, oh, you know, where am I on the receiving end of that? You know, I think the biggest thing is remembering our own power to either just be sitting still or moving with it, and when is the right time for us, and when is the right time for me. And yeah, so it's been a really interesting year, and it's time for me to make more wind knots.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I was just thinking the same thing, that it's definitely time. And I love what you're saying about power, because when, even in the book, when she discusses how to make the knots, you know, she advises about how to get our head and our body into alignment, and really coming from that solar plexus area, which is our seat of personal power. So again, like asking, you know, when we think about creating in this world, it really comes from asking the questions, and the answers aren't here yet. And so we want to create space for that to come in some way, and for us to receive it. And so that's the same thing with the wind knots. So really taking time. This is not a hurried exercise at all. This is from a really deeply, deeply centered and intentional space, where you're thinking broader than this immediate moment. Not that you can't have assistance in the immediate moment, because the first knot is great for that. But when you think of the third knot, you're thinking a little bit farther out. You know, something that you're needing more energy for, more support for, something that's a little bit longer reaching. And the middle one is, you know, you can do the knots 1, 2, 3. So like this would be the first part of the intention, second part, third part, and it's a building up of sorts. I've used them for 3 different things that I needed assistance with. You know, so when you think about the wind knots, when you read through this chapter, could you immediately envision the way that you would want to be using it? Professionally, personally, health, finance, relationship, clearing out stagnation in any way, you know, and again, I'm being vague and broad. Specificity is key here. Like really think about if you went to a restaurant and you placed an order and you said, yeah, I'll just have a sandwich. And then they bring you this monstrosity and you're like, there's no way I could ever eat that. I don't want that in my mouth. I don't want that for my body or my health. So then you start becoming a little more specific. Well, I would like a sandwich on rye. Okay, well that helps me a little bit, but are you vegetarian? Do you want meat? Do you like condiments? You know, keep refining until you feel really locked in and like, yes, this is true for me. This is exactly what I'm intending and needing in my life. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Everybody with me? Okay, so page 114. Much like us today, sailors were not always adept at calling up the perfect wind to suit every situation. Sometimes tossing in too much silver raised a powerful storm, causing their boat to capsize. Paula, this reminds me of your question about the third knot. And here's what I wrote down. So when I was reading that part in the book, this is what I wanted to throw into our conversational kitty, if you will. If we overdo a process, where are we placing our sense of trust and allowing? And what I mean by that is if I'm throwing in all of the silver, I've left no room, time, space, willingness for the winds to meet me. Right? So I set my knots, I set my intention, and then I just keep going and going and going. So it'd be like doing like a 50-yard rope of wind knots. 3 is more than enough. But if I kept going, just like here, the sailors, they were throwing in all this silver. They never stopped to wait and be with trust that everything that they had asked for and intended would come. And so that's on the other side of this creation is, you know, yes, being specific, yes, being with your intention, and leaving room for the response. So that comes from a really open-hearted space, not fearful, not concerned. I'll even use the word faithless, but some of us don't really believe in faith per se, but I think you understand where I'm trying to get to. So that phrase really stuck out at me. Does that bring up anything for anyone else?
When you just said that, what I heard was that old phrase, throwing caution to the wind. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes it's not. And,
Right.
you know, like throwing caution to the wind being, and so what are you throwing? What are you throwing in? But that's what I thought of. And I hadn't thought of that before when I read that line. But yeah, there's two sides to a coin, right? There's two sides to what they're throwing. And I'm almost wondering if that's part of where that saying came from. I don't know. But two sides to a coin when you're flipping, right? Two sides to that. And yeah, throwing caution to the wind. That's what's coming to me.
Whee! Yeah. Anyone else?
Well, a question up, and I don't know if it's in there and I missed it, but is there a certain time frame for the 3 knots? I understand it sounds like it's a process that you have to monitor internally, but you know, is it supposed to be a a shorter time frame, or is there any time frame? Or
When you're speaking of time frame, are you talking about when you're actually creating the knots?
well, when you're going to release them, 1,
Okay.
2, or 3?
So after you've created them, it's important for you to listen to when it is time, and you will get a nudge of one sense or another, like, okay, you know, and sometimes it's anticipation, like, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And that's okay. When you're getting to the 3rd knot, you'll know when it's time because you've worked through the other 2. I always have a sense of when it's time to release. It can be because of the way that the weather's happening outside that you feel called to go out and release, you know? So I'll give an example of what I mean by that. We were at the Omega Institute for the wind 5-day wind retreat. And they had all this algae covering the lake. And that would have been a great place if we had had all of our knots ready at that time to release into nature to help with that situation, right? So that's what I mean by sometimes we can use the knot to be in participation with nature as opposed to a more specific thing personally. So, you know, nature might intend for you to come out and release the knot. Other times you just kind of, you know, you keep thinking about it, like it's time, or, oh, I haven't released my knots. Maybe I should do that. And so just this again is that real intuitive, paying attention, noticing what feels right for you. Because it's so specific to your intentions, it's hard to say you have to do it in 3 weeks. It doesn't quite work that way. They're used for when the time is right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Kim here. How's everybody?
Good.
Good.
How are you?
Well, it's been interesting. I missed last week again, but so I was feeling like I was a little out of sync again. But now just listening to everybody, it's brought me back right to where we are, I think. But you know what's interesting? What I'm feeling inside my body right now is this sense of fear. And as I listen and I'm, kind of mulling things over, I'm thinking, well, it's kind of confusing because it seems to be a lot of mixed messages, right? And so what does that mean? Does that mean that, like nothing's black or white, right? So maybe there's something in the middle there that I'm meant to figure out. So do I throw caution to the wind, or do I and completely put my faith in the wind to direct me where I need to go, and my, other spirit guides, or do I, again, do I, going back to, setting intention and asking specific questions, like trying to kind of take it apart and get some clarity there, right? And, so which is it? Because that, to me, that sounds like, it's kind of they're both at opposite ends of the continuum kind of thing, right? And then I'm thinking about what I think it was you, Brigid, that was just saying about, how sometimes you just have to kind of let things happen when they need to happen, right? Or maybe I'm confusing that somehow, but
It was close.
what
yeah.
I've been feeling lately, though, is that, I'll sometimes feel this sense of fear, the sense of resistance when I'm thinking about something that I need to do, should do. And then I give it a little time and I kind of let it percolate a little bit. And then it seems to be that I know exactly when I need to do it, right?
Right.
And but it really is about, I guess, listening to those intuitive guides to help you figure out, when is it right to, to put your faith completely in the universe and have it guide you where you need to go, and when do you need to actually do something more intentional, take some action to make things happen, right? I think that's the question I think I've struggled with for a long time, and I think that's what, when I think about that, I think that's where the fear is coming from too, because, I've been thinking about this for a long time and I still don't have the answer. And then I'm starting to think, well, now, maybe that's the answer, that just wait for the answer to come to you when it's the right time, right? But then again, living in this society, we're always, supposed to be doing something, right? Making a plan, setting goals and all that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, like I say, I'm just feeling, I guess, really quite confused today.
I know I know how that feels, but as I listen to you, you're a lot clearer than I think you're giving yourself credit for. So you did answer your own quandary twice with, right? But
I don't know that I know.
but that's what confusion does. Confusion makes us believe that we're not trustworthy with what we know, right? Because there's two polarities inside of us. There's ego and spirit. Ego protects us and spirit guides us, right? I mean, I'm like just glazing over the surface here, you guys, like, because this is such a deep contemplation that you're bringing up, but I do want to address it somewhat. So the confusion is often ego, because the moment that we're challenging ego, we're unsafe, and we're not going to keep a habitual pattern in place that ego's really comfortable with, because it's like autopilot. Doesn't even have to think about it. But the minute you start asking questions, now the ego's like, wait a minute. Oh God. Oh, what's she doing over there? Where's she going? What's happening? What is she going to bring in the house now? Like, do we have anywhere to put this on the shelf? And then all of the confusion starts rolling. But that first hit, that first inclination that made you turn and ask a question, that was spirit guiding, right? And it's the same with the winds. Like when you sit down to do the wind knots and you like to use your guidance system, you brought them up a few times too. Invite your helping spirits to come with you. Invite the wind that you pull to join you in this process. And then, every time you feel that sense of confusion, that's an invitation for you to either slow down or invite that confusion to be with you and not be at odds.
Yeah.
Partnering with it. Like, okay, you feel really spinny and unsure, and I see that, and I love you, and it's going to be okay. So let's just sit here for a minute and catch our breath and, let me know when you feel safe again.
Yeah.
And then take another step, and so luckily there's 3 knots. So give yourself that spaciousness of time to really, get with that sense of trust, because I do hear it when you talk. I do hear your sense of self-trust. So really connecting with that and then partnering with the wind to do the process.
Yeah, I think that's what I need to keep remembering is that, I know, I know the universe has my back. So I just have to remember to invite them to walk with me kind of thing.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you for that,
Just
Brigid.
like how you showed up for the call, right? You felt like you were behind and then you got on the call and we're all like, oh, big hugs. Come on, get back in the pool. Here we are. We're all swimming together. Let's do this. Yeah. You're always welcome here. You're never behind. Just don't get ahead because that's harder to keep up with.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that too.
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? This is a discussion, so feel free to just unmute and hop in. Okay. Also on page 114, as you become proficient at knot making, you will learn how to use wind knots to harness your thoughts, your emotion, and physical objects. Your knots will become sacred containers of stored energy. Deborah had brought that one up earlier. And I was asking if you've ever experienced a process like that before, where you really worked at the proficiency of it. So, earlier we did prayer flags, and several people brought up doing the prayer ties, which is an experience of proficiency, right? And so I was just inquiring if anyone has had that experience of working at something over and over and over, and something where you were holding your energy for future use, like really storing a part of your energy to help you in the future. Has anyone ever done anything like that before?
I have. There's in Tai Chi and Qigong, there's a movement to store the energy that you've just been using in whatever movements you're doing, but then you can store it in your dantian just below the belly button. So I just love that concept because I have a practice of waking up the chi and shaking it up so that I can be aware of it moving through my body and be aware of where it's stuck, to give it more attention. And then to be able to store it. But first, I do a practice of discovering the chi and then gathering it And there are others of purifying, and there's just a wonderful process of moving it, and storing just happens to be one of those movements. So yeah,
It's beautiful. I love listening to you talk about it.
I love doing it.
Yeah.
There's one called Primordial Qigong, which is just, it's like a wheel, but you're moving, your body's moving one direction and the other direction at the same time. It's just really amazing, but you continue to move around bit by bit. So you're doing all the directions. And it's such a deep, deep, ancient practice. And to me, that's one of those safe containers where the energy can come out and you can play with it, feel it, experience it, and then store it for later.
Yeah.
When everything goes to hell and you need help.
You need reassurance.
That
Oh.
helps. If I could mention one other thing on it, actually, I think the sentence starts on page 114 at the bottom. As you exhale, remind yourself again that your breath is capable of reaching the other side of the world in a matter of days. I mean, that's such an expansive, to know we have that capability, because we're all connected through our breath, through the wind. Wonderful feeling. Just wanted to make sure I got that one in there somewhere.
Yeah, I have that one written down too. I love how we're totally in sync with this chapter. And the thing that came back to mind is the whole idea about the way that we're breathing, right? So really taking time each day to be conscientious of what we're breathing out, and even if we're breathing out fire, it doesn't have to be a personal fire, right? Like, that jerk just cut me off on the road. It could just be fire, right? That has such a different resonance to it and momentum than blaming. Now it's like going towards that person as opposed to just being the raw energy. Something I've been thinking about. I'm not perfect at it. I definitely have a lot of fire in me. But it is something that I keep considering. When Renee brought that up last week, I was like, yeah, this whole exhalation, it's a big deal. I mean, a lot of us are consciousness people. We really enjoy high level conversations about theory and philosophy and everything. And like this, how it comes out of us, it's everything, really. So thank you for bringing that up.
As you say that, I am reminded of the curanderas and curanderos that I've worked with, and how they use sometimes to get to release things, release negative energy or stuff you don't need anymore. They will spit on the ground or do something like the and I use rosemary and do a body limpia with rosemary, fresh rosemary. And part of that, it also is just, you can just shake stuff off. But I think I love the because I think that's more effective. And you can feel it leaving you.
Yeah, because the wind is moving, it's stirring, it's trying to help us excavate, right? And like release. And sometimes that comes out in a misdirected way. Like, I'll want it to be on another person because that's my conditioning, blame or attack or whatever. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I can get better at this. I can really just like imagine the flames or, you know, all the emotion, imagine a pool of water coming out, whatever. So I wanted to put that into our little toolbox as something to think about and maybe play around with and see how it feels for you. You know, it's something that I'm going to be working on for a long, long time in my own practice.
I give a lot of that into the earth because she composts everything, you know?
Yeah.
And I've learned that it's okay. Of course, I like to ask permission first, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I was just thinking about, along that same line, what was coming to my mind was about, you know, we talk a lot about body language and, you know, not necessarily, but our own body language, and that sometimes when our emotions are expressed through our breath, like we'll gasp or sigh or, you know, a big yawn or whatever, you know, we might be in shock, and it's like and it's like something, we use that phrase too, you know, it takes your breath away, again, for things that are beautiful and things that are not, but we react through our breath, both in and out, exhale, inhale. So that's what was coming to my mind, and it is something to be aware of. What are the things that make you, you know, inhale with an emotion, and what are the things that make you like mostly when we exhale, we're exhaling frustration, or when we, you know, so it's just interesting. It's all interesting, and it's all connected to the breath.
Yeah, it is very interesting. Yeah. And, you know, like when I watch animals, the way how they just naturally release, you know, they usually do the same thing, carry the, like a lot of the yawning and stretching of the jaw, or even like shaking. They shake a lot of stuff off, you know. I don't know what that would look like in the world if I just walked around like this all day. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm ready to try it, but yeah, I mean, it's all about the expression. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah. All right. Remind me when it's time. So that's a different way. You know, we were talking about intuitively feeling it, but you can also ask for guidance. And so I just want to close out on page 116. I apologize. I didn't realize we went over on time. I love hanging out with you guys. I didn't even notice. On page 116, nature has its own sense of timing and consciousness. Winds blow of their own accord when and wherever they choose. And I just want to leave us with that note and holding that for ourselves now that Mercury's gone direct and we're out of Scorpio season and we're done with Taurus. Just to remember that we too have a direction and a momentum and a purpose, and it's okay to go where we need to go. So thank each of you for attending today. And I'm just going to invite, you're welcome. I'm just going to invite us before we disband to turn our attention back to our sacred circle, noticing all of the love that we had stored in that basin, and inviting all of that love to wash over each one of us as it disperses on the winds and goes wherever it is needed most at this time. And also thanking our New Zealand wind, Tahira Matea, disbanding from our sacred circle. As you make your way out of the archway, wishing each of you a very blessed, spacious, and peaceful weekend. And we will be discussing chapter 15 next week, Thursday at 5 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome, dear. Bye-bye.
Next Thursday's Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. No, you're
Should we
right.
still? Yeah.
I'm going to check. No, I don't believe I won't be here. I'm really glad that you brought that up. I completely, that just passed me by. Okay, let me check and see if we can do it a different evening next week. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I'll put it on the wall.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
You're welcome. Happy Thanksgiving.